The scanner beeped steadily in Thomas Lane's hand as he moved deeper into the cave system. He had been walking for nearly an hour, following a strange biosignature that kept appearing on his equipment. The readings made no sense. This planet was supposed to be uninhabited except for the small human survey team camped 15 kilometers away. Thomas adjusted his headlamp and squeezed through a narrow passage between two rock formations. The cave opened into a larger chamber, and that was when he smelled it. Something organic. Something alive. He froze, his hand instinctively moving to the emergency beacon on his belt. A soft sound echoed through the darkness. It sounded like breathing. Multiple sources of breathing. "Hello?" Thomas called out, his voice bouncing off the stone walls. "Is someone there?" For a long moment there was only silence. Then, from the shadows at the far end of the chamber, a figure emerged. Thomas's breath caught in his throat. She was Valkyrie. He recognized the species immediately from his xenobiology training. Her skin had the characteristic crystalline patterns that ran along her arms and face, though they were dim, barely glowing. She was thin, dangerously thin, and she moved with the careful slowness of someone who had not eaten properly in weeks. Behind her, 3 small faces peered out from behind a rock formation. Children. All of them Valkyrie. All of them staring at him with wide, frightened eyes. The woman raised her hands, palms forward, in the universal gesture of peace. "Please," she said in broken galactic standard. "Please do not report us." Thomas lowered his scanner slowly. "Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" The woman's legs seemed to give out and she sank to her knees. The children started forward, but she held up one hand to stop them. "We need everything," she whispered. "Food, water, safety." Thomas moved closer, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. As his headlamp illuminated the cave more fully, he saw the evidence of their desperate situation. A few scattered belongings. Empty water containers. A makeshift sleeping area with thin blankets that would barely provide warmth. "My name is Thomas," he said gently. "I'm a scientist with the human survey team. How long have you been here?" 6 weeks, the woman replied. Her voice was hoarse as if speaking caused her pain. "Maybe 7. I have lost count." The oldest child, a girl who looked to be about 8 years old in human terms, stepped forward. She positioned herself protectively between Thomas and her mother. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Why are you here?" "Mira, please," the woman said weakly. "He is human. They are different." Thomas crouched down to be at eye level with the girl. "Your mother is right. I'm just here to study the plants and animals on this planet. I wasn't expecting to find anyone." He looked back at the woman. "What's your name?" "Lyra," she answered. "These are my children. Mira, Finn, and Nora." She gestured to each child in turn. The middle child, a boy, watched Thomas with silent intensity. The youngest, a tiny girl who could not be more than 4 years old, clutched a small crystal in her hands. Thomas set down his equipment bag and pulled out his emergency ration pack. "Here," he said, offering it to Lyra. "It's not much, but it should help." Lyra stared at the food as if she could not believe it was real. Then tears began streaming down her face, cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you." The children rushed forward, and Thomas watched as Lyra carefully divided the rations between them. She took nothing for herself. When Thomas noticed this, he pulled out his water bottle and handed it to her. "Drink," he said firmly. "You need it as much as they do." While the children ate, Thomas asked the question that had been burning in his mind. "Why are you here? What happened?" Lyra took a long drink of water before answering. "My husband," she said quietly. "He left us. The colony transport was delayed and he could not wait. He said we were shameful. That the children were defective." Her voice broke on the last word. Mira made a sound like a wounded animal. The boy Finn stared at the ground. Little Nora continued eating, too young to fully understand. Thomas felt anger rising in his chest. "He just left you here? With no supplies? No way to contact anyone?" "It is complicated," Lyra said. "In Valkyrie culture our family situation is problematic. The children have mixed genetics from a trade marriage that failed. They are seen as contaminated. My husband faced much pressure from his clan." "That doesn't make it right," Thomas said flatly. Lyra looked at him with surprise. "You understand?" "I understand that those are children and they're starving and anyone who would abandon them is a coward." Thomas ran his hand through his hair, thinking. "Look, I need to report this. My team can help you. We have medical supplies, food, communication equipment. Terror flashed across Lyra's face. No. Please. If you report us, they will send us back to the Valkyrie homeworld. They will take my children. They will separate us. That can't be legal, Thomas protested. It is Valkyrie law, Lyra said. Abandoned families are considered failed units. The children would be sent to institutional care. I would be. She trailed off, unable to finish. Thomas looked at the three children. Myra's defiant expression barely hiding her fear. Finn's silent watchfulness. Nora's innocent trust as she offered him a piece of her ration bar. There has to be something we can do, Thomas said. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her belongings and pulled out a small data pad. I have researched your species, she said softly. Humans? I have read about your cultures, your laws, your unusual behaviors. Unusual? Thomas asked. You adopt children who are not your own, Lyra said. Not just within your species, but you have documented cases of humans raising other species' offspring. You form bonds that are not biological. You call it love. Thomas felt his throat tighten. Yes, he said. We do. Lyra took a deep breath, and then she did something that made Thomas's heart stop. She knelt formally, placing both hands over her chest in a gesture that was clearly ceremonial. Thomas Lane, human scientist, I formally request that you become our provisional guardian under Valkyrie law. I offer you nothing but gratitude and respect. I ask only that you save my children. Wait, Thomas said, his mind racing. What does provisional guardian mean exactly? It means you would be legally responsible for us, Lyra explained. You would be our protector, our provider. In Valkyrie culture, it is a sacred bond. Mira grabbed her mother's arm. Mom, you can't just ask a stranger. I have no choice, Lyra said gently. We have no food left. No water. In a few more days we will be too weak to survive. Thomas looked at each of them. At Lyra's desperate dignity. At Myra's fierce protectiveness. At Finn's silent pleading eyes. At little Nora, who had started to smile at him despite everything. He thought about his empty apartment back on Earth. His failed marriage. His colleagues who often said he cared more about alien species than his own kind. Maybe they were right. Maybe that was exactly what made him the right person for this impossible situation. I'll help you, Thomas heard himself say. But I need 48 hours. I need to gather proper supplies. Medical equipment. Food that's suitable for Valkyrie metabolism. Can you survive 2 more days? Lyra's face transformed with hope. Yes, we can survive. I'll be back, Thomas promised. He looked at the children. I'll be back and I'll bring everything you need. As he gathered his equipment and prepared to leave, little Nora ran up to him and pressed the crystal she had been holding into his hand. For you, she said shyly. So you remember. Thomas closed his fingers around the small stone. I'll remember, he said. I promise. He climbed back through the narrow passage and emerged into the fading light of the planet's dual suns. His mind was already racing with plans, with logistics, with the enormity of what he had just agreed to do. He had told Lyra he needed 48 hours to gather supplies. That was true. But what he really needed was time to understand what he was committing himself to. Time to decide if he was ready to change his entire life for 4 strangers hiding in a cave. Thomas looked down at the crystal in his hand. It caught the sunset, throwing small rainbows across his palm. 2 days. He had 2 days to make the most important decision of his life. Thomas sat in his quarters staring at the datapad screen until his eyes burned. It was 3 in the morning, and he had been reading Valkyrie family law documents for the past 6 hours. What he had discovered made his hands shake. Provisional guardianship was not temporary. It was not just emergency foster care. According to Valkyrie legal code, if the guardian bond lasted 6 months without being formally dissolved, it automatically transformed into permanent legal marriage and full parental adoption. The guardian became spouse and parent in the eyes of the law. Forever. And the consequences for backing out were severe. The guardian would face criminal charges for abandonment. The family would be marked as twice failed, guaranteeing that the children would be sent to institutional care with no chance of appeal. Thomas pushed away from his desk and walked to the window. Outside, the alien landscape glowed under the light of 2 moons. Somewhere out there, 15 kilometers away, people were waiting for him. Trusting him. Depending on him. He had promised them 48 hours. Those hours were almost gone. His ex-wife's voice echoed in his memory. You're too analytical, Thomas. You think about everything so much that you forget to actually feel anything. You'll never really love something unless you can dissect it first. Maybe she had been right. But when he thought about little Nora pressing that crystal into his hand, about Finn's silent tears, about Myra's desperate bravery, about Lyra's dignified collapse, he felt something. He felt everything. A knock on his door made him jump. He opened it to find Dr. Karen Wells standing in the corridor, her arms crossed and her expression furious. "My office, now," she said. Thomas followed her down the corridor to the research wing. Karen waited until they were inside her office with the door sealed before she spoke. "I checked the supply logs," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Medical supplies for non-human metabolism. Nutrition supplements rated for Valkyrie biology. Emergency shelter equipment." "Thomas, what the hell are you doing?" There was no point in lying. Karen was too smart and she knew him too well. "I found someone who needs help," he said simply. "Someone?" Karen moved closer, studying his face. "Or multiple someones. How many Valkyrie are we talking about?" "4. A mother and 3 children." Karen closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Tell me everything." Thomas told her about the cave, about Lyra's story, about the children. He told her about the provisional guardianship and what he had learned about Valkyrie law. When he finished, Karen was silent for a long moment. "Do you understand what you're doing?" she asked finally. "This isn't just helping someone. This is binding yourself legally to 4 aliens you met 2 days ago. This is marriage, Thomas. This is becoming a father. This is throwing away your career because the moment colonial administration finds out you've been hiding unauthorized inhabitants, you're finished." "I know," Thomas said. "Do you?" Karen's voice rose. "Because I don't think you do. Interspecies family dynamics are complicated. The cultural differences alone could destroy this before it starts. You'll face prejudice from both sides. The Valkyrie will see you as an outsider stealing one of their own. Humans will see you as that weird guy who married an alien. Your research career is over. Nobody will take you seriously after this." "I know," Thomas repeated. Karen stared at him. "Then why?" Thomas thought about how to answer. "Do you remember that lecture we sat through back at the academy? The one about human evolution and social bonding?" "Vaguely." "The professor talked about how humans are one of the only species that regularly adopts and raises children that aren't genetically related to them. Not just human children, but we've documented cases throughout history of humans raising animals, caring for injured creatures, forming bonds across species lines." Thomas met Karen's eyes. "The professor said it was a weakness. That we waste resources on individuals who don't contribute to our genetic legacy." "I remember," Karen said quietly. "But that's not a weakness," Thomas continued. "That's what made us survive. That's what built civilizations. We don't just protect our own genetics. We protect each other. We choose our families. And maybe that doesn't make evolutionary sense on paper, but it's the most human thing we do." Karen was quiet for a long time. Then she walked to her desk and pulled up a file on her terminal. "If you're going to do this, you're going to do it right. I can forge the supply requisition papers to make them look like legitimate research expenses. I can claim you're doing extended field work on indigenous fauna. That buys you time, but not much. A week, maybe 2 before someone asks detailed questions." "Karen, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," she interrupted. "Because you're right. Humans don't always make sense. That's kind of our thing." She transferred files to a data chip and handed it to him. "Here. Documentation for your cover story. Memorize it. And Thomas? Don't make me regret this." Thomas took the chip. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. And for the record, I still think you're insane." 6 hours later, Thomas stood at the entrance to the cave system, carrying 2 heavy packs filled with supplies. He had medical equipment, nutritional supplements specifically formulated for Valkyrie biology, water purification tablets, thermal blankets, and enough preserved food to last them a month. He had also spent 3 of those 6 hours learning basic Valkyrie phrases from the expedition's cultural database. His pronunciation was terrible, but he had memorized the words of the Guardian vow. When Thomas entered the main chamber, all 4 of them were waiting. Lyra stood at the center, her children arrayed behind her. They looked even thinner than Thomas remembered, but there was hope in their eyes now. "You came back," Mira said, and there was surprise in her voice. "I said I would," Thomas replied. He set down the packs. "I brought everything I could carry." The children moved forward, but Lyra stopped them with a gesture. "First, the ceremony," she said. "If Thomas still wishes to proceed." Thomas's heart hammered in his chest. This was it. The moment of commitment. Once he spoke those words, there was no going back. He looked at each of them. Mira trying so hard to be strong. Finn watching him with those intelligent, wounded eyes. Nora holding her mother's hand and smiling at him. And Lyra standing with desperate dignity, offering him nothing but the chance to be needed. Thomas knelt in front of Lyra, the way he had seen in the cultural database. He placed his right hand over his heart, then extended it toward her. She placed her hand over his, and he felt the strange coolness of her crystalline skin. In halting, poorly pronounced Valkyrie, Thomas spoke the guardian vow. I bind myself to you. I will provide protection and sustenance. I will honor your ways while teaching my own. I will not abandon. I will not betray. I become shield and shelter. I become guardian. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She spoke the response in her own language, then translated for him. I accept your bond. I grant you authority over my life and the lives of my children. I accept your protection and your guidance. You are guardian. You are chosen family. Thomas felt something shift in the air between them, something profound and irreversible. The children came forward, and Lyra guided each of them to place their small hands on top of Thomas's and hers. It is done, Lyra whispered. We are bound. Thomas stood slowly, suddenly aware of the weight of what he had just done. For people were now his legal responsibility. In 6 months they would be his family in every sense of the word. Nora broke the solemn moment by launching herself at Thomas and hugging his leg. Can we eat now? She asked. Despite everything, Thomas laughed. Yes. Let's eat. As Thomas unpacked the supplies and set up a proper camp, he showed them the medical scanner, the water purifier, the thermal blankets. Lyra watched him work with an expression he could not quite read. You learned our language, she said quietly, when the children were busy examining the food supplies. Just a few phrases, Thomas admitted. I wanted to do it right. Why? Lyra asked. You could have simply helped us in secret. You did not need to bind yourself. Thomas thought about his answer carefully. Because anything worth doing is worth committing to completely. And because you deserve more than half measures. Before Lyra could respond, Thomas's communicator chirped. He pulled it out and saw a message from Colonial Administration. His stomach dropped as he read it. What is wrong? Lyra asked, seeing his expression. They're questioning my supply requisitions, Thomas said slowly. They want me to report back to base camp within the week for a review. What does that mean? Thomas looked at his new family. At the children finally eating real food. At Lyra no longer quite so thin and desperate. At the hope he had given them. It means, he said quietly, that we have 7 days before everything becomes very complicated. Mira, who had been listening, spoke up. Will they take us away? Thomas met her eyes. Not if I can help it. But as he settled down for the night, listening to the sound of the children breathing peacefully for the first time in weeks, Thomas knew the truth. The hard part was just beginning. He had made his commitment. Now he had to figure out how to keep it without losing everything else in the process. Outside the cave, the 2 moons set below the horizon, and the first light of dawn began to break across the alien sky. The cave no longer looked like a place of desperation. Over the past 6 days, Thomas had transformed it into something resembling a home. Solar panels he had requisitioned powered small lamps that cast warm light across the stone walls. Thermal blankets hung as makeshift curtains, creating separate sleeping areas. Water containers stood full and clean in one corner. The smell of cooking food replaced the scent of fear and starvation. Thomas sat cross-legged on the floor, teaching the children a simple earth game called tic-tac-toe. He had drawn the grid on a flat stone with chalk. Okay, Nora, your turn, he said, handing the little girl the chalk. Nora carefully drew an X in the center square, her tongue sticking out in concentration. Mira watched from the side, pretending not to be interested but clearly paying attention. Finn sat closer, studying the pattern of XS and OS with intense focus. Good move, Thomas said. Now I have to think carefully. Why do you play games? Mira asked suddenly. Valkyrie children study. We learn useful skills. Thomas drew his O in a corner square. Games are useful. They teach you strategy, problem solving, how to win and lose with grace. Plus they're fun. Fun is important too. Fun is wasteful, Mira said, but her voice lacked conviction. Fun is what makes life worth living, Thomas replied. He looked at Lyra, who was sitting nearby, observing them. Don't you think? Lyra was quiet for a moment. Valkyrie culture does not emphasize enjoyment. We emphasize duty, discipline, purpose. And look where that got your ex-husband, Thomas said, then immediately regretted his words. Sorry? That was harsh. But Lyra smiled slightly. No, you are correct. Perhaps duty without joy creates cold hearts. Over the following days, Thomas established routines. Morning lessons where he taught basic galactic standard and human mathematics. Afternoon explorations outside the cave, carefully supervised. Evening story time where Thomas told tales from Earth mythology. The children slowly came alive in ways that surprised even Lyra. Finn spoke more. Not much, but he began asking questions about Earth, about oceans and cities and animals. His voice was soft but curious. Myra's constant hostility began to crack. One afternoon, while Thomas was setting up the water purifier, she approached him hesitantly. "Can you teach me that game again?" she asked. "The one with the grid? Tic-tac-toe?" "Of course." Thomas drew a fresh grid. They played 3 rounds. Myra won twice. When she won the second time, she smiled. It was the first real smile Thomas had seen from her. "You're a fast learner," Thomas said. Myra looked down at her hands. "I'm sorry I was mean to you before." "You were protecting your family," Thomas replied. "That's not mean. That's brave." "You're not what I expected humans to be like," Myra admitted. "What did you expect?" "Cold. Calculating. Only interested in profit and expansion." Thomas laughed. "Some humans are like that. But most of us are just trying to figure things out as we go, same as everyone else." But despite the progress, Thomas could see his own limitations. He was awkward with physical affection. He second-guessed every decision. At night, he lay awake wondering if he was doing everything wrong, if he was failing them, if Karen had been right about him being too analytical to really love anything. Then Nora got sick. It started on the 6th night. Thomas woke to the sound of crying. He found Nora curled up in her sleeping area, her small body shaking with fever. Her crystalline skin patterns were flickering erratically. Lyra was already awake, holding her daughter. "It is flame fever," she said, her voice tight with worry. "Common in Valkyrie children, but dangerous." Thomas immediately went to his medical supplies. He pulled up information on his data pad, his hands steady despite the fear coursing through him. Flame fever. High temperature. Risk of neurological damage if not treated quickly. The standard treatment required specific compounds that he did not have. But he could synthesize them. Thomas worked through the night. He used his portable chemistry kit to break down and recombine the medicines he had brought. The process was delicate. One wrong measurement could make the medicine toxic instead of helpful. Lyra watched him work. "You should rest," she said. "You have been awake for many hours." "I'll rest when Nora is better," Thomas replied, not looking up from his calculations. By dawn he had synthesized the first dose. He administered it carefully, then sat beside Nora's sleeping area, monitoring her vital signs on his medical scanner. Myra and Finn woke to find Thomas still there, his eyes red from exhaustion but his focus unwavering. "Is she going to die?" Finn whispered. They were the first words Thomas had heard him speak in 2 days. "No," Thomas said firmly. "I won't let that happen." The first day passed. Nora's fever remained high but stable. Thomas synthesized more medicine, adjusting the formula based on her responses. He barely ate. He did not sleep. On the second night, Lyra sat beside him while he worked. "Why do you do this?" she asked quietly. Thomas looked up from his chemistry kit. "What do you mean?" "Nora is weak. In Valkyrie culture we would accept this as natural selection. We would allow the fever to take its course. We would not waste valuable resources on a child who might not survive." Thomas felt anger flash through him, hot and sharp. "She's not weak. She's sick." "That's different." "Is it?" Lyra asked. "In nature the sick die. The strong survive. That is how species evolve." "That's one way species evolve," Thomas said. "But humans evolved differently. We survived because we took care of each other. Because we carried the injured. Because we fed the sick. Because we refused to leave anyone behind." Lyra was silent, watching him. Thomas continued, his exhaustion making him more honest than usual. "You know what makes humans apex predators? Not our strength. Not our speed. We're not the strongest or fastest. What makes us dangerous is that we care. We form bonds. We protect each other even when it doesn't make logical sense. That's not weakness. That's the most powerful survival strategy ever evolved." "Your species should have died out," Lyra said softly. "By all evolutionary logic, caring for the weak should have destroyed you." "But it didn't," Thomas replied. "It made us stronger. Every person we saved, every child we protected, every injured person we carried, they all contributed something. They taught something. They loved someone. Nora might grow up to cure a disease. Or compose beautiful music. Or just be a kind person who makes the galaxy a little better. I won't give up on that possibility just because she's sick right now. Lyra reached out and touched his hand. Her crystalline skin felt cool against his warmth. You are a strange creature, Thomas Lane. I'll take that as a compliment. On the third night, Nora's fever broke. Thomas was dozing in his chair when her small voice woke him. Thomas? He was instantly alert. Hey, little one. How do you feel? Tired? Thirsty? Thomas helped her drink water, his hands shaking with relief. Lyra woke and rushed over, tears streaming down her face. She held Nora close, then looked at Thomas with an expression he had never seen before. Gratitude, yes, but something deeper. Something like wonder. Mira and Finn woke to find their sister conscious and improving. Mira hugged Thomas so hard he could barely breathe. Finn simply said, "Thank you," but the weight in those two words carried everything. Thomas finally allowed himself to sleep, but he was woken just 3 hours later by his communicator beeping urgently. He stumbled out of his sleeping area and checked the message. It was from Karen. Get back here now. Lieutenant Paul Grant from Colonial Administration Security arrived this morning. He's investigating your supply requisitions personally. He's giving you 72 hours to return to base camp or he's coming to find you. Thomas, this is serious. He has the authority to arrest you. Thomas read the message twice, his stomach sinking. 72 hours. 3 days. He looked back at the sleeping area where his family rested. Nora was finally recovering. The children were finally starting to heal. Lyra was beginning to trust him. And now he had to choose. Return to base camp and face the consequences, possibly losing everything he had built here. Or stay and become a fugitive, making criminals of all of them. Lyra appeared beside him, moving silently. What is wrong? Thomas showed her the message. Her face went pale as she read it. You must go, she said immediately. You must protect your career. We will. No, Thomas interrupted. Thomas, you have sacrificed enough. I said no. Thomas's voice was firm. I made a commitment. I spoke the guardian vow. That means something to me. I'm not abandoning you. Any of you. Then what will you do? Thomas looked at his communicator, then back at Lyra. He thought about Lieutenant Grant, about Karen's warning, about his career that was probably already over. I'm going back to face him, Thomas said finally. But not to surrender. I'm going to fight for us. For this family. There has to be a legal way to make this work. And if there is not? Thomas met her eyes. Then we run. Together. But I won't give up without trying everything first. Lyra touched his face gently, a gesture of affection that surprised them both. You are either very brave or very foolish. Probably both, Thomas admitted. He had 72 hours. 3 days to figure out how to save his career, protect his family, and convince Colonial Administration that what he was doing was right. 3 days to prove that choosing love over logic was not insanity but the most human thing possible. Thomas began packing supplies for the journey back to base camp. Whatever happened next, he would face it head-on. That was what Guardians did. That was what fathers did. That was what humans did. Thomas stood outside the cave entrance at dawn, checking his equipment one final time. Behind him, he could hear Lyra preparing the children for the journey. They would all travel to base camp together. There was no other choice now. Lyra emerged from the cave, her expression determined but frightened. Thomas, before we leave, I must say something. What is it? She took a deep breath. I release you from the guardian vow. You have done more than anyone could ask. You saved Nora's life. You gave us hope. But I will not let you destroy your future for us. The vow can be dissolved if both parties agree. I agree. You are free. Thomas had expected this. He had prepared his answer during the sleepless hours of the previous night. No, he said simply. Thomas, please listen. I am listening. And my answer is still no. Thomas turned to face her fully. When I spoke that vow 6 days ago, I did it because it was the right thing to do. Because you needed help and I could provide it. But something changed over these past days. What changed? Everything. Thomas struggled to find the right words. When Nora was sick, I didn't stay awake for 3 nights because of duty. I stayed awake because the thought of losing her terrified me. When Mira finally smiled at me, I felt something I haven't felt in years. When Finn asked me about Earth's oceans, I wanted to show him everything, teach him everything. Lyra, I'm not doing this for obligation anymore. I'm doing it because I want to. Because you're my family now. Because I choose this. Tears streamed down Lyra's face. You barely know us. I know enough, Thomas replied. I know Mira pretends to be tough but cries quietly when she thinks no one is listening. I know Finn is brilliant and observes everything before he speaks. I know Nora gives away her favorite things to people she cares about. I know you're the strongest person I've ever met. That's enough for me. Lyra reached out and took his hand. Then we face this together. Together, Thomas agreed. The journey to base camp took 4 hours. Thomas had fabricated a story about discovering an isolated Valkyrie family during his survey work, claiming he had been providing humanitarian assistance. It was thin, but it was better than nothing. Lieutenant Paul Grant was waiting when they arrived. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Beside him stood Dr. Susan Harper, the colonial administrator, a woman known for her strict adherence to regulations. Dr. Lane, Harper said coolly. You've been busy. I was doing my job, Thomas replied. I discovered individuals in distress and provided assistance. Grant stepped forward, studying Lyra and the children. And you didn't think to report this immediately? You requisitioned supplies under false pretenses. You violated protocol. You lied on official documents. I did what was necessary to save lives, Thomas said. Harper held up her hand. Save the speeches, Dr. Lane. We have serious concerns here. Concerns about coercion, improper conduct, and violation of colonial regulations. She looked at Lyra. Ma'am, I need to speak with you and your children privately. Dr. Lane, you will wait in the conference room. Thomas started to protest, but Lyra touched his arm. It is all right, she said quietly. We will tell the truth. The next 3 hours were the longest of Thomas's life. He sat in the conference room while Karen brought him water he could not drink and food he could not eat. His mind raced with possibilities, each worse than the last. Finally the door opened. Harper entered, followed by Lieutenant Grant and 2 specialists, a child psychologist named Dr. Alan Webb and a xenocultural expert named Professor Rachel Kim. Dr. Lane, we've completed our preliminary interviews, Harper said, sitting across from him. The situation is complicated. Are they all right? Thomas asked immediately. The children are fine. Physically healthy, showing no signs of abuse or coercion. In fact, Dr. Webb reports they're remarkably well-adjusted considering their circumstances. Harper paused. Which brings us to the real issue. There's something you need to know about these children. Something their mother finally revealed during our interview. Professor Kim spoke up. The children possess unusual empathic abilities. They can sense and sometimes influence emotions in others. It's a rare genetic mutation that occurs in less than 1% of Valkyrie births. Thomas felt his confusion show on his face. I don't understand. Why would that matter? In Valkyrie society, empathic abilities are feared, Kim explained. They're seen as a form of mental contamination. Historically, Valkyrie culture values emotional control and hierarchy. Children who can sense and affect emotions are considered dangerous, capable of disrupting social order. That's insane, Thomas said. That's their culture, Harper replied. And it's why Lyra's husband didn't just abandon them. He was ordered by his clan to eliminate them. Lyra fled to save their lives. The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. He was going to kill them? His own children? According to Valkyrie clan law, yes, Kim said. Lyra committed a serious offense by fleeing. She's considered a criminal on her homeworld. Grant leaned forward. Which brings us to the legal nightmare you've created, Dr. Lane. You've bound yourself to a fugitive and her genetically aberrant children. If the Valkyrie government discovers their location, they can demand extradition. Then we don't tell the Valkyrie government, Thomas said. It's not that simple, Harper replied. We have treaties, obligations. So what are you saying? Thomas felt anger rising in his chest. We hand them over to be killed? We send children to their deaths because of bureaucracy? No one is suggesting that, Harper said firmly. But we need to find a legal solution. Which is why I'm making the following decision. She pulled up a document on her data pad. I'm granting you provisional custody of Lyra and her children under colonial humanitarian law. However, there are conditions. Thomas waited, hardly daring to breathe. First, you must complete a xenofamily bonding certification program. Second, you will submit to quarterly evaluations to ensure the children's well-being. Third, you accept that your career trajectory has fundamentally changed. You'll be reassigned to xenofamily services. No more solo survey missions. No more pure research. I accept, Thomas said immediately. Don't you want to think about it? Grant asked. No. I accept all conditions. Harper studied him for a long moment. Dr. Webb, in your professional opinion, Is this arrangement in the best interest of the children? The psychologist nodded. Absolutely. The bond between Dr. Lane and these children is genuine. They trust him. They're healing because of him. Separating them now would cause significant psychological harm. Very well. Harper signed the document with her thumbprint. Provisional custody is granted. You have 6 months to prove this arrangement works. Thomas felt relief wash over him, but it was short-lived. Harper's expression remained grave. There's one more thing, she said. While we were conducting the evaluation, a priority message arrived from the Valkyrie homeworld. She turned her data pad so Thomas could see the screen. It was an official extradition demand. The Valkyrie government had somehow learned of Lyra's location. They were demanding the immediate return of the children under Valkyrie law. They claimed jurisdiction over all Valkyrie citizens, regardless of location. How did they find out? Thomas asked. Grant's expression was grim. Someone reported it. We're investigating, but it doesn't matter now. The demand is official. We have 2 weeks before a Valkyrie diplomatic delegation arrives to collect them. Thomas felt his world crumbling. You can't let that happen. I don't want to, Harper said. But Valkyrie law technically supersedes our authority in matters involving their citizens. Unless we can find a legal precedent to refuse the extradition, my hands are tied. Then we find one, Thomas said desperately. There has to be something. Professor Kim spoke up hesitantly. There might be one option. It's obscure, and it's never been tested in a situation like this, but there's a clause in galactic family law about citizenship transfer. Explain, Harper demanded. If a guardian bond is formally consummated through a recognized marriage ceremony, and if the children formally accept the guardian as their legal parent, the family unit can apply for citizenship in the guardian's home species. In this case, human citizenship. Once granted, Valkyrie law would no longer apply. Thomas's heart raced. So if Lyra and I get married and the children accept me as their father, they become human citizens? In theory, yes, Kim said. But it requires a formal ceremony. And it has to happen before the Valkyrie delegation arrives. You have 2 weeks. Grant shook his head. This is crazy. You're talking about marriage as a legal loophole. I'm talking about marriage as a commitment, Thomas said. He looked at Harper. Can this work? Harper was quiet for a long moment. I need to research the precedents. But Kim is right. If you complete the marriage ceremony and the children's acceptance ritual, I can grant them human citizenship under colonial law. At that point, the Valkyrie government would have no legal claim. Then that's what we'll do, Thomas said. Dr. Lane, you need to understand what you're proposing, Harper said seriously. This isn't a temporary arrangement. Valkyrie marriage bonds are neurologically permanent. Once you and Lyra connect through their empathic ceremony, you'll be linked for life. There's no divorce. No separation. This is forever. Thomas thought about Lyra's courage. About Myra's fierce protectiveness. About Finn's quiet intelligence. About Nora's innocent trust. He thought about 3 nights staying awake to save a sick child. He thought about teaching games and telling stories and building a home in a cave. I know, he said. And I'm ready. Harper nodded slowly. Then you have 2 weeks to prepare. Because once that Valkyrie delegation arrives, if you haven't completed this process, I won't be able to stop them from taking the children. The real battle is just beginning, Dr. Lane. I hope you understand what you're fighting for. I do, Thomas said. I'm fighting for my family. As he left the conference room to find Lyra and tell her about the plan, Thomas felt the weight of the decision settle on his shoulders. 2 weeks to marry someone he barely knew. 2 weeks to become a permanent father to 3 alien children. 2 weeks to make a choice that would define the rest of his life. But when he saw Lyra waiting with the children, saw the hope and fear in their eyes, he knew there was really no choice at all. There was only love and the courage to choose it. Thomas spent 12 sleepless nights researching galactic family law. His quarters were filled with data pads displaying legal codes, precedents, and treaty documents. The words blurred together, but he kept searching for any weakness in the Valkyrie extradition demand. On the 13th day he found it. A single clause buried in Section 7 of the Galactic Family Rights Treaty. If a guardian bond was consummated through recognized marriage, and if all children formally accepted the guardian as legal parent, citizenship could transfer to the guardian species. The family would become human under colonial law. Thomas read the clause 20 times to be certain. Then he went to find Lyra. She was in the temporary housing unit that colonial administration had provided, teaching Nora how to read Galactic Standard. The little girl was concentrating hard, tracing letters with her finger. Mira and Finn were nearby, Mira sketching in a notebook while Finn read quietly. "Lyra, can we talk?" Thomas asked. "Privately?" They stepped outside into the evening air. The dual moons were rising, casting purple light across the colony buildings. "I found a way to stop the extradition," Thomas said. "But it requires something significant from both of us." Lyra waited, her crystalline patterns glowing softly in the moonlight. Thomas took a deep breath. "We need to get married. Actually married, not just the guardian bond. If we complete a full Valkyrie marriage ceremony, and if the children formally accept me as their parent, I can apply for human citizenship for all of you. Once granted, Valkyrie law won't apply anymore. They can't take you." Lyra was silent for a long moment. "Thomas, do you understand what Valkyrie marriage means? It is not like human marriage. When we bond, our minds connect through my empathic abilities. You will feel everything I feel. I will feel everything you feel. It is permanent. There is no separation. No divorce. Once bonded, we are linked for life." "I know," Thomas said. "I researched it. I understand the risks." "Do you?" Lyra moved closer. "You will experience my memories, my pain, my fear, everything I have been through. And I will experience yours. Every thought, every emotion. There are no secrets between bonded Valkyrie. Can you accept that?" Thomas thought about his failed marriage, his loneliness, his fears of inadequacy. All of it would be exposed. Lyra would see everything. "Yes," he said. "I can accept that. But I need to know something first. Is this what you want? Not as a legal necessity. Not as survival. Do you want to marry me?" Lyra reached up and touched his face, her cool fingers gentle. 10 days ago, I would have said I was agreeing out of desperation. But that is not true anymore. You stayed awake for 3 nights to save my daughter. You taught my children to laugh again. You look at me not as a failed Valkyrie mother but as someone worthy of respect and partnership. Yes, Thomas. I want to marry you. Not just to save us, but because I choose you." Thomas felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Then I'm proposing. For real. Not as a legal loophole but as a commitment. Lyra, will you marry me?" She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes." They told the children that evening. Mira was suspicious at first, demanding to know if this was just for legal reasons. Thomas answered honestly. "It started as a legal solution," he admitted. "But it became something more. I love your mother. I love all of you. I want to be your father. Not because the law requires it but because I choose it." Finn spoke up, his voice quiet but clear. "What if the ceremony doesn't work? What if they still take us?" Thomas knelt down to Finn's level. "Then we run. All of us together. I won't let them separate us. I promise." Nora climbed into Thomas's lap and hugged him. "I want you to be my daddy." "I want that too," Thomas whispered, holding her close. The ceremony was scheduled for 5 days before the Valkyrie delegation's arrival. Dr. Harper, Karen, Lieutenant Grant, and Professor Kim would serve as witnesses. Kim helped Thomas understand the ceremony's requirements and taught him the proper responses in Valkyrie. The night before the ceremony, Thomas could not sleep. He stood outside looking at the stars, wondering if he was making the right choice. His old life was gone. His research career was over. He was binding himself permanently to 4 people he had known for less than 3 weeks. Karen found him there. Having second thoughts? More like 10th or 20th thoughts, Thomas admitted. You could still walk away. Harper would understand. She'd find another solution. Thomas shook his head. "No. I couldn't live with myself if I abandoned them now. And honestly, I don't want to walk away." "Is that crazy?" Karen smiled. "Completely crazy. And completely human. That's what we do, Thomas. We choose connection over logic. We build families from courage instead of biology. It's what makes us who we are." The ceremony took place in the colony's central meeting hall. Lyra wore traditional Valkyrie ceremonial robes, her crystalline patterns glowing brightly. The children stood nearby, dressed in their best clothes. Thomas wore a simple formal suit, his hands shaking slightly. Professor Kim guided them through the ritual. Thomas and Lyra stood face to face, hands clasped. Kim spoke the ceremonial words in Valkyrie, then translated for the witnesses. "Do you, Thomas Lane, accept this bond? Do you open your mind and heart to complete connection? Do you accept all that she is, all that she has been, all that she will become?" "I do," Thomas said. "Do you, Lyra of the Valkyrie, accept this bond? Do you open your mind and heart to complete connection? Do you accept all that he is, all that he has been, all that he will become?" I do, Lyra answered. Kim nodded. Then speak the final vow together and complete the bond. Thomas and Lyra spoke in unison, their voices blending. I choose you. I bind to you. I become one with you. From this moment until the end of consciousness. Lyra's empathic abilities activated. Thomas felt something shift like a door opening in his mind. Suddenly he was flooded with sensation. He felt Lyra's memories pouring into him. Her childhood on the Valkyrie homeworld. Her forced marriage. The birth of her children. The terror of fleeing. The desperation in the cave. But also her hope. Her growing feelings for him. Her love. And she felt his memories. His lonely childhood. His failed marriage. His years of isolation. His moment of decision in the cave. His growing love for her and the children. His determination to protect them no matter the cost. The connection settled into place, permanent and profound. Thomas could feel Lyra's presence in his mind, warm and constant. She could feel his. They were separate individuals, but connected in a way that transcended words. Thomas opened his eyes and found Lyra staring at him, tears streaming down her face. I see you, she whispered. All of you. And you are beautiful. So are you, Thomas replied. The final part of the ceremony required the children's acceptance. Each child had to formally declare Thomas as their parent. Kim explained that this was the most sacred part of Valkyrie family law. A child's acceptance created an unbreakable legal bond. Mira stepped forward first. She stood before Thomas, her young face serious. I am Mira, daughter of Lyra, she said formally. I have watched you. I have tested you. I have seen your heart. Her voice cracked with emotion. You stayed when everyone else left. You saved my sister. You taught us to laugh again. You are not my birth father, but you are my true father. I accept you as parent. I choose you as family. Thomas pulled her into a hug, both of them crying. Finn came next. He spoke clearly, his voice stronger than Thomas had ever heard it. He recited the traditional acceptance phrase in perfect Valkyrie, then translated. I accept Thomas Lane as father. I grant him authority over my life and my future. I bind myself to his family line. From this day forward, I am his son. Finally, Nora approached. She looked up at Thomas with her innocent eyes and said simply, Daddy? That single word carried the weight of complete acceptance, complete trust, complete love. The ceremony was complete. They were a legal family under colonial law. Dr. Harper immediately processed their citizenship applications, granting them human status under emergency provisions. It's done, Harper said. They're human citizens now. The Valkyrie government has no legal claim. But Thomas knew the real test was still coming. 5 days later, the Valkyrie delegation arrived. 3 officials in formal robes, accompanied by security personnel. And behind them Lyra's former husband, a tall Valkyrie male with sharp features and cold eyes. The meeting took place in the same hall where the wedding ceremony had occurred. Thomas stood with Lyra and the children, while Harper and Grant represented colonial administration. The lead Valkyrie official spoke in harsh tones. We demand the immediate return of the criminal Lyra and her defective offspring. They are Valkyrie citizens subject to Valkyrie law. Harper stepped forward. I'm afraid that's no longer accurate. Lyra and her children are now human citizens under colonial law. They completed a legal marriage ceremony and citizenship transfer. Your jurisdiction no longer applies. The official's face darkened with anger. This is a violation of treaty obligations. You cannot harbor our criminals. They're not criminals, Thomas said. They're refugees seeking asylum from persecution. Lyra's former husband pushed forward. You know nothing human. These children are aberrations. They threaten the natural order. I have returned to restore my family's honor and complete what should have been done months ago. Mira stepped forward before anyone could stop her. Her voice rang out clear and strong. I invoke the right of abandonment. Everyone froze. Even the Valkyrie officials looked shocked. Kim whispered to Thomas, it's an ancient law. A child can publicly denounce a parent who abandoned them, stripping that parent of all legal claims. Mira continued, her words formal and precise. You left us to die. You chose clan honor over your children's lives. By ancient Valkyrie law, you are no longer my father. You have no claim over me or my siblings. We reject your authority. We reject your family line. We are no longer yours. Finn and Nora stepped forward to stand beside their sister, their unified stance making the denouncement complete. The former husband's face turned purple with rage, but the lead official held up his hand. The right of abandonment has been properly invoked. The denouncement is valid under our law. This changes nothing, the official argued. They are still Valkyrie? No, Harper interrupted. She held up her data pad, displaying the citizenship documents. They are human citizens. This is not open to debate. If you attempt to remove them by force, it will be considered kidnapping and an act of aggression against the colonial world. Are you prepared to start a diplomatic incident? The Valkyrie officials conferred quietly. Finally, the lead official spoke. This matter is not resolved. We will file formal protests with the Galactic Council. You're welcome to try, Harper said coolly. But the law is clear. This family is under colonial protection. I suggest you leave. The delegation departed, Lyra's former husband casting one last hateful look before disappearing through the doorway. Thomas felt his knees go weak with relief. Lyra leaned against him, and he could feel through their bond that she was experiencing the same overwhelming emotion. It was over. They were safe. They were free. 6 months passed like a dream. The family moved into a permanent residence on the colony. Thomas accepted his new position as a xenofamily counselor, helping other interspecies families navigate cultural differences. He discovered he loved the work, loved helping others find the same happiness he had found. Lyra became a cultural liaison, using her unique experience to bridge human and Valkyrie communities. She helped negotiate better understanding between species, proving that cooperation was possible. The children thrived. Mira grew confident and strong, talking about becoming a diplomat someday. Finn excelled in his studies, his brilliant mind finally free to explore without fear. Nora remained joyful and loving, the heart of their family. One evening they all sat on the terrace of their home watching the dual moons rise. The children were playing a game Thomas had taught them, their laughter echoing across the garden. Lyra rested her head on Thomas's shoulder. Through their empathic bond, he felt her contentment, her love, her gratitude. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. Giving up your old life for this? Thomas thought about his answer. He thought about lonely nights in empty apartments, about failed relationships, about years spent studying life instead of living it. Then he looked at his children playing, at his wife beside him, at the family they had built from nothing but choice and courage. Not for a second, he said. You taught me something, Lyra. You taught me what it really means to be human. To choose love over logic. To choose family over fear. To build something beautiful not from blood or biology, but from the simple decision to care. Lyra smiled. I think we taught each other that. Nora ran up and climbed into Thomas's lap. Daddy, tell us a story. Tell us about Earth. Thomas held his daughter close, feeling through his bond with Lyra the perfect completeness of this moment. All right, let me tell you about a place called home. Not the place you're from, but the place you choose. The place where people love you. The place where you belong. As he spoke, the stars came out one by one above them, infinite and beautiful. And Thomas understood finally that humanity's greatest gift was not intelligence or technology or strength. It was the capacity to see a stranger and choose to make them family. To look at someone who needed help and decide that their need mattered more than convenience or logic. To choose love. Always and forever. To choose love.